Dave, can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, we've been doing this since lockdown, and I'm still not getting it all right. But yeah, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone that's joining us from around the world. Welcome to the launch party for Book 17, Practical Adept, Book 17 of the Spellmonger series. So it's really great to be here with you all. I am one of Terry's long-time Spellmongrels. Shameless plug for the Spellmonger fandom wiki. So that's always looking for new editors. But I think in the last 30 days, we've had about 17,000 visits. So we're really excited to see you all there. Huge thanks to Podium for making this possible. Definitely shout out to Victoria and Kyle in the background, and especially Cole, who's running the show today. Huge thanks, Cole. Just a quick format. We are going to be hearing from Terry shortly on his current adventures, upcoming tours, and future works. So spoiler free as much as we can. When we get to about the halfway mark for this live stream, we will be issuing a spoiler warning where we're then going to delve into Practical Adept, some of the creative process, some of the behind the scenes, and deep insights. So over to you, Craig.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Craig Mapes, U.S. Army retired, known on Discord as Mage Lord Turleman, Marshal Insane. I'm also over on Facebook and on Reddit. It's just C Mapes. I'm another long-term fan of Terry's work and one of his spellmongrels. And I also want to give a thanks to people who are in the background who you won't see today. We have 4 people who are working diligently to feed questions and keep this talk going. So we want to thank the Garden Society, which is Andrew, Sid, Manji, and US Dave, who are working very hard, but you don't get to see it.
No worries. Thanks, Craig. And just a quick introduction for Terry. So Terry is a science fiction and fantasy writer, um, author, and of more than 50 books, some of which were still to publish. So. And innumerable articles under many pseudonyms, including New York Times best-selling author for the Star Trek novel Spartacus, and famously the sequels to H. Beam Piper's Space Viking, and the original epic fantasy series, the Spellmonger series. Over to you, Terry.
Hey, thank you so much, and thank everybody, both in front of the scenes and behind the scenes, who is making this possible. This is a class operation. I'm very proud to be affiliated with it, and very much appreciate all the very hard work that has been gone on to put this together. Because I'm very excited about Practical Adept. It's doing very well in terms of sales, both on Kindle and on Audible. And I'm very gratified by that. Critical reception has been great. I've gotten a number of direct fan letters, as well as very positive reviews. A couple of the to be expected 1-star reviews that seem to pop up just because there's that one guy out there who doesn't like something about it. But those are thankfully very rare. In terms of what I'm working on now, I am just today halfway through the 8th chapter of The Talon and the Flame. That is the Dara-centric romantasy that will be about 35 chapters long, and will be out at some point. We haven't selected a direct release date for 2025 yet, nor has a narrator been chosen. It will not be John Lee. I don't think. I of course will defer to Podium on this, but I have a feeling that they're going to go for a female narrator, which I think is appropriate for this book. And then following that, I will be diving in and we'll have started before I finish Talon and the Flame with the next kind of spin-off novel, The Golden Goblin, which will be a Tyndall and Rondell story in kind of a Heart of Darkness pastiche as they go off. I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say it'll be a rollicking tale of an adventure, and have a lot of characters that we haven't seen in a long time pop back up. And there will be dark revelations and all sorts of fun stuff like that. The usual Spellmonger twists and turns, and hopefully a bunch of witty dialogue too. I know that's what a lot of people enjoy about the Tyndall and Rondell exchanges. So we will definitely be exploring that. Personally, just on a personal note, it's been kind of a rough week. Not only did we experience a brush with the hurricane, which is always eventful, but last weekend, my brothers and I got together with our kids and went to the Maggie Valley in Virginia and spread my parents' ashes in the New River, one of the oldest rivers in North America. Ironically, the Maggie Valley was a place where they frequently like to retreat for kids-free weekends, and it is a gorgeous part of Virginia. Reminds me as parts of Scotland, actually. On my recent trip, I saw a lot of similarities between the geographies there. And then the day we got home, I found out that a childhood friend of mine who sadly has been in the throes of addiction for some time got a hold of some bad drugs and passed away. And so I'm in the process of also organizing a memorial service for Seth. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's one of those things that it was unexpected, but it was long expected at the same time. And my condolences go out to his mother and his brothers, his family. He was predeceased by his son and his common law wife, who died under similar circumstances. So there was a whole bunch of stuff going on, but that's part of life in the 21st century now, unfortunately, and it's something that we all have to contend with. So, but I'm trying to be on a happy note, and I am. Like I said, it's been ups and downs with a book release and a funeral and hurricanes and
it's life.
Yep, it's just life, and life goes on. So let's go ahead and get to some questions. I'm eager to
just before we jump into that one, we had a reveal. So I think you've decided on a title for book 18.
Yes, let's go ahead and get that out there. Book 18 will be titled Sea Mage. That was previously a working title for my youngest son Hayden's work, but we decided that it would be more appropriate for this book. And you can, anybody who has finished Practical Adept will see kind of the direction that we might be going with that. And in a lot of different ways. And I think Sea Mage is the most appropriate title for the next book. So that's the reveal on that. And it will be out. I have no idea when exactly. I will be diving into that probably concurrently with the Golden Goblin, or at least starting it while I'm working on that. And we'll try to get it finished up by the end of 2025 at the absolute latest, hopefully. Wow. Much sooner than that, but when you work for yourself, you spend every day working that you can. So I certainly welcome the challenge.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Cool. If we could get the first question, I will go with that. Thanks. So, first question. We've been gathering these questions for a little while now from all over social media. Lots of fans really interested in what's happening. So, and as a reminder, this is spoiler-free time. But in thinking of the game of Whispers, could someone from Ramia be as adept at the game as someone from Wenchar? Or are the subtle differences that make it more challenging for outsiders to master?
Good question, and I'll try to keep an exhaustive explanation short. But basically, the game of Whispers is a kind of general term for the sort of character assassination, rumor, innuendo, everything from that all the way up to actual assassination. It is based roughly on the way that the courts of, say, the Venetians and the other Italian city-states played out in the early to mid-Renaissance, as well as a number of the Chinese courts and the court of Byzantium, where similar, rules of the road applied. And of course, you're basically talking about something that doesn't have any formal rules, not as many as, say, piracy or La Cosa Nostra. These are individual families who are working in their best interests. And in each case, it really depends on the political position and the aptitude and the capabilities of a family to be able to defend their position of power and go after the others. I think that a lot of it translates between different regions. So a Ramiran nobleman who engaged in the Game of Whispers, and it's essentially a political game. And it stems from the imperial magocracy period, which was very much like Byzantium or the late Roman Empire, or any number of the Chinese empires, probably some of the later Second Han dynasty in particular. But it's a reflection of court politics anywhere, and it's court politics by extension, kind of a very personalized series of vendettas. So it really depends on how bold a particular player is, how willing they are to strike, and just how far they're willing to go without pissing off people who aren't interested parties into becoming interested parties. And therefore, there's a lot of social leverage that's involved. So I think that you could easily be adept in one court coming from another. As a matter of fact, I think that would give you certain advantages. So that's essentially my answer on that.
Wow, that's cool. Great.
Yep. Can we have the next question, please? So, what do Aserio and the other members of the Secret Tower think about Min in the current events? And will they play a more significant role in the story?
To answer the second part of the question first, yes, they will. And in terms of what they're thinking at this point in the story, they've got things pretty good in the terms that they're used to thinking of them. Don't forget that the Order of the Secret Tower has basically devolved into a kind of glorified Elks Club, where their original purpose has been either forgotten or misremembered. And they're far more invested in it as a professional association and status symbol. If you can consider membership in a secret society to be a status.
But Terry, didn't you say the Junior League was in Ramir? The Big League Secret Tower is in the Broken Isles.
Well, there are.
That feels spoilery to me, Craig.
Okay, yeah. Let's save that discussion.
Well, that was from book 4. Come on, guys.
But they do have influence, and they do have contacts, but they're very, as a lot of groups like that are very self-interested and interested at most in their most pressing concerns, which for the Secret Tower and Ramir at this point is basically holding on to the power that they have and extending their mercantile empire as a challenge to Merwin or even Alshar. Those are their biggest maritime competitors. Since the Castali are shit at sea.
Could you remind us as well, just for those fans who are tuning in who are not totally obsessed with the series, who was Aserio?
Okay, Aserio is Pentandra's father, and he actually, I guess you could say, he invested into Minalan when he found out that Minalan had control of a witch stone. Completely self-interested. But it was the kind of thing that he took a risk. His daughter just happened to have this ex-boyfriend who had this connection. And it paid off for him and his glorified Elks Club. Minalan has yet to really address them as a political force because they haven't really been in his way. But that doesn't mean that he won't use them as a tool. And right now, you can consider them a kind of underutilized tool. But how effective a tool that is, that's open to question. After the revelations and Practical Adept, not to get spoilery, but after those, you see them in a slightly different light, and you can start to appreciate what men might do with them in the future.
Okay. Can we call for the next question? Call. Okay, thank you. We got a lot of new technical language for thaumaturgy in this book. How many of the words have actually etymology behind them? And how many were made up specifically to screw with John Lee?
Great question. And actually, it's not technically new technical language. Everything that I used in Practical Adept was actually used in Enchanter. And if you have access to the Kindle copies, there is a complete, I believe, orosmology of enchantment, basically a dictionary for enchantment terms that explains what each one of those terms means. To the first part of the question, there is indeed actual etymology behind it. As a matter of fact, that's something I'm very proud of. In my survey of fantasy literature of the past, I noticed that for enchantment in particular, they always used very vague terms. The elven lords forged the ring, but there's no real discussion of the nuts and bolts of the magic behind forging a ring. Do you just make a pretty ring and throw a couple spells on it, or is the process a little more involved? And deconstructing the enchantment process for the story, which in Practical Adept is a little bit important in a lot of different ways. I had to use the technical terminology that I came up with in Enchanter originally, and I think it works pretty well once you know the terms. Most of these terms actually came from Middle English or early modern English, and they tend to be, although some are blatant loan words from Greek and Latin. And basically, I looked for words that meant one thing, but their meaning was such, like paraclete. That's an excellent example. That's become fairly common usage in Spellmonger to describe a particular enchantment. But that originally came from Latin, from the description of the Virgin Mary as the intercessor between God and man. She was considered a divine paraclete. Denying her essential divinity, but we won't get into the politics of that. Don't want the
very wise.
But that term, I basically repurposed and revalorized for enchantment to make it fit very well into the overall milieu. And I did the same thing with all the others. Hockster is a Middle English term for a pocket. Quite simply, but it's one that fell out of use, and I thought it was a great opportunity to bring it back. And if you go back and break down each of those technical words, in most cases, there is a specific etymology behind it that I researched. I blame the whiskey. I did a lot of research on that sort of thing back for Enchanter, so I can make it feel more authentic and then have a kind of consistent framework to discuss enchantment in Magic going forward. And I pulled it out a couple of times. I believe I used it in Foot Wizard as well, briefly. But they were not made specifically to screw with John Lee. I do other things for that. And in Practical Adept, I think the worst I hit him with was an entire paragraph of alliteration. Well, the Welsh was bad enough, but the one paragraph that Jonik says that is alliterated with that was done purely to screw with John
Well,
Lee.
that and the Disney broshure.
Oh yeah, that was fun too. But that was I think he enjoyed that as much as I did. Honestly, he would make a great Disney announcer if he ever decides to stop doing audiobooks. But and I've been listening to the Practical Adept audiobook over the past week or so, and I'm still very amazed at his ability to understand the dramatic situation of a scene and deliver a performance. He's not just reading the books; he's acting them, and that's an important difference. I think I've heard other books recently that narrators came across as reading a story, which is great and it gets the job done. But John Lee just brings something magic to it, and all I can do is hope to give him some good material to work with going forward.
No worries. Craig.
All right.
Yeah, can we have the next question, please? What happened to Garkescu, and is he still as pretentious as ever?
Garkescu, we will be seeing again in the Golden Goblin. That's as much as I want to say about the character at this point, because I want his appearance to be kind of a surprise when it does happen, and it might be unexpected. But in terms of his pretentiousness, let's just say that has been challenged, and he has found some level of humility in what has happened to him after choosing arguably the wrong side in a war, and then choosing it. He didn't end up with the Enshadowed. He's still on the bad guy side, but he didn't end up with the Enshadowed. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, we will be meeting him again, and we will see that the last 10 years has really worked on him in a lot of intriguing ways.
Oh wow!
But there's still some pretentiousness there. You can't have a former big fish in a small pond and not lose some of that pretentiousness. So looking forward to that.
No worries. Yes, please, Cole. Thank you. When will we see the other Alons? So if anyone's checking out the wiki, they'll find the Gora Alons on there, or if you read back to book one, that have been mentioned and not yet introduced.
Good question. Probably not until Minalan moves beyond the area of the Five Duchies and the Shattered Sea. They certainly exist on Calador, and there are other Alon species that were imported with the Great Migration. But that being said, not all the Alon thrive the same way that the ones that we've met have on Calador. And some have thrived, but have largely stayed away from the other Alon for their own reasons. And when we get out into more exotic places, we will probably encounter them more. Although I wouldn't say that we might not meet a character or two who might be Gora Alon or another type of Alon that gets mixed up with the story. That's certainly a strong possibility.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, can we have the next question, please? Are there specific historical periods that inspire the political structures in your books? And do you intend for the various time periods in the series to echo familiar eras in our own history?
Well, it's not like I took, the English Civil War and added dragons to it or nothing, but I was directly inspired by several historical periods, some of which I've mentioned. Specifically, feudal Europe, particularly the 100 Years' War era, but everything back from antiquity provides some level of inspiration. I'd like to think that the imperial magocracy was less cultic than, say, the Roman Empire was, and a little more business-like, more like the Byzantium. But I also take a lot of inspiration from the various Chinese dynasties, which are just fascinating. I think that Westerners don't spend enough time learning about Chinese history, just because anything that happened in the West happened in China 1,000 years before, it seems, politically speaking. And they've been through some really interesting eras. But I would also add to that the various Muslim empires, the Tibetan Empire, which was fascinating to study, the expansion of the Russian Empire, and how Russia dealt with a very polyglot situation, and a really embarrassment of the lack of defenses when it came to getting conquered. There's a lot to history, and I would like to say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And when you're dealing with some things are universal between historical epics and are dependent, I would say, more on the level of civilization and the complexity of civilization than anything else. But human nature doesn't change. Ambitious men are always going to be ambitious. Schemers will scheme, players will play, losers will lose. And they're not always the people that we think they will be at the beginning of the story. But there are plenty of emperors who ended up with ignoble ends, and plenty of beggars who ended up as emperors. So there's a lot to play with. And while I do borrow most heavily from the European medieval period, I'm willing to look at any epic in human history and blatantly steal whatever I think is going to serve the story. The key is to steal from the best, and steal something unusual. You know, everybody can go for gold, but every now and then you want to pick up something that hasn't been done to death already, and try to find a unique application for a particular situation. So.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Yes, please call. Thank you. Okay, swinging all the way back into book 13, Foot Wizard. Did the Yith, if everyone remembers the monster, want the Megalith? Oh, go on. Zal the Yith, that's correct. Want the Megalith because it wished to experience the memories of the handmaiden it contained.
Interesting question. I would have to say that the motivations of an ancient, early, impossibly ancient and unbelievably early elder race with godlike powers are going to be difficult to suss out. I think it was as a matter more. I don't think it was directed at the memories the handmaiden contained. I can guarantee you that the Yith has already absorbed some memories from far more powerful members of the Bundle species. I think, honestly, the Yith's primary motivation was entertainment. I think the Yith, as it surveys the universe, looks for interesting individuals doing interesting things, just because, you know, it's the elder god equivalent of channel flipping. You know, just going through the channels and trying to see if there's something interesting on. When you've been around for millions and millions of years, you've been there, done that. You've seen it all, and so after a while, you just start looking for the things that interest you. And I think that Minalan coming across with the megalith in his pocket was an interesting enough opportunity where he jumped all over that. And anytime you mind probe and memory rape an Alon, it's going to be fun. So I think that was his motivation for learning men's history.
Okay, can we have the next question, please? We've had this one before, Terry, and it goes back to Court Wizard. What happened to Perceive from Court Wizard? Will he make a return?
He was a great character, and I think I will return him. quick and dirty. He's still at the palace, and the new palace in Verone, and probably has higher station at this point. But he was a great character, and at the time I was being influenced by a character that I particularly liked on a TV series, and I kind of stole some of his attributes because I like the cut of his jib, so to speak. But when we eventually get back to Verone, the next time we do, we'll probably run into him again.
Well, he was brilliant, and
Yeah, he was.
really...
He was.
Very socially adept.
Yes, exactly, and that's the sort of when you do well in that environment, you tend to stay in that environment. You know, that's his industry, so to speak, and regardless of who he serves, he's going to do his best. So he's a great servitor, but he's also a great character. So I probably will resurrect him in some form or fashion and bring him back into the story.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. On to mind. Thanks very much, Cole. So the mind-to-mind communication is a great invention or ability, but couldn't it be used by enemies to flood someone's mind with messages? And we've got Lucas from Facebook to thank.
Okay, good question. And yeah, it could. The Nemavorti don't really use that level of communication, partially because they're all technically dead. And that might screw with it. That's why in the back channel communications that Min has had with various Nemavorti, they usually go by some other way, some other method. But that's not to preclude that couldn't happen. And I think what would eventually be developed, if it isn't already part of the mind-to-mind communication system, is an ability to block someone, which goes beyond just merely blocking someone. It's a lot like I guess going silent, so that you can't even be located through your witchstone. That's something else that hasn't been explored to this point, is utilizing someone's witchstone to locate them. Now that was tried with the prisoners that were captured at Seven Door and taken to Darkfaller. But there are means of blocking that as well. It's a very useful spell, roughly analogous, of course, to a telephone conversation, or an email box, I guess. Well, more telephone. But still, if you're annoyed by someone who's harassing you, it should be fairly easy to block them, magically speaking. Now, that doesn't preclude someone trying to force the issue, and we may get into that at a later book. I think that would be fascinating to explore, actually, but I'll wait till I can use it as a plot device in my favor.
We got a little bit of that, didn't we, back in Enchanter, when
a little bit, yeah.
Popped into Min's mind while he was in the privy.
Yeah. But very good question, and again, something that will arise, and it comes up actually in Talon and the Flame, as I'm writing it, is the fact that the Magi have an enormous advantage over, with the High Magi at least, have an enormous advantage over everybody else because they can communicate directly. In an era where the fastest form of communication is essentially carrier pigeon, at best. The Magi's ability to coordinate and to communicate at that level gives them, in some ways, it's superior to an electronic message system. So, something to watch going forward.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the next question, please? This one's a little thought-provoking. Minalan's diary in Mad Mage, we learned that ironite contains iron atomi within a copper-heavy matrix. What happens to ironite when it's affected by the Snowstone class spell that affects copper or potassium?
Gosh, that's a great question, and we'll probably end up finding out the answer to that. But I put that in there for very specific reasons. For one, I had to explain why ironite was green, and copper is the easiest solution to that. But beyond that, there is a, I guess, formula, you could say, about the various effects that the various permutations of the Snowstone spell can have on a very select set of minerals. They were selected for a very good reason. I don't want to reveal it because that gets a little more into the technical stuff than I want to at this point. It will be explored at a later date. But let's just say that the second successful Snowstone spell had a lot more effects than anybody is going to realize for a book or two, and will ultimately be impactful to the overall storyline and the development of magic in Calidor.
That's really good. Cool, thank you. And the last one for this round, please. Please, Cole. Thank you. What's the time limitation on the Arcane Closet? And it seems like a very powerful spell.
It is. It is a very powerful spell. I think Minalan and Alon is really aware of it and aware of its capabilities. It is similar, I hesitate to say, but this is the best explanation. It's similar to J.K. Rowling's Room of Requirement in the Harry Potter series. It's essentially a space that can be whatever he needs it to be at the time. It's very malleable, and the time dilation effect is actually variable. He can alter it. So if he needs 3 days to think about something and he's only got 10 minutes, technically he can jump in there for 3 days, think about it, conjure whatever he needs to keep himself alive and going, and do what he needs to do. That time dilation effect is very poorly understood from a magical perspective. The Alon and the Bundle are aware of dimensional magic in which this sort of time dilation fits. And they do use some properties of it, but neither one of them really understands it the same way that Min does at this point. And so he's really playing with a big advantage when it comes to how he sees his plan to save Calidor come into being. And it's also an advantage that he can use in a lot of other ways that will become apparent. But I didn't want to explore that too soon because it makes men seem too OP. And that's I'm trying to avoid that. One of the challenges of writing a long form character like this, even in a fairly episodic way, is to ensure that you don't get to the end of the story too quickly. And Min at this point is still very much developing his capabilities and exploring them. As a matter of fact, if I had to come up with an overall theme for the second 10 books, it would be that of exploration and inquiry. He's seeing just how far magic can take him. And as we've seen in the past, he's willing to push some boundaries beyond what the Alon know, or the Bundle know, or the Mexicans know, or he has access to understanding and information that he will employ, and in some cases he's going to have to employ it very quickly because he's also going to start losing his memories of that, and that's going to be impactful. So next couple of books ought to be exciting.
keep reading, keep listening. I think that's really interesting you say that, because it's obviously the first 10 books are very much about building, getting established, learning what magic could do, and then he was forced into the exploration.
Yeah, I actually stole that progression from Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He quite casually points out that most civilizations, most cultures, most developments, human endeavors fall into three progressing stages: survival, inquiry, and then sophistication, or the what do we eat, how do we, why do we eat, and where shall we have lunch categories of human civilization. And I think I've kind of stuck with that when it comes to fleshing out the overall decologies, with the first 10 books being Minalan learning how to survive, and then the second 10 books, Minalan getting a lot of perspective on the why of things. And then in the third 10 books, we'll see him applying that in a way to get to achieve his ends. Hopefully all of them, but at least some of them, and it may not be successful, but by God, he's going to try.
Wow. That's brilliant. And that nicely brings us on to the next section of the show, of the party. So I want to say a huge thank you to everyone that's come along, who hasn't quite finished Practical Adept and doesn't want any spoilers. I'm looking at you, bro. Yeah, me and my brother met Terry recently at World.
Oh, I so much enjoyed that. We met up at Worldcon in Glasgow, and it was a lovely afternoon. I essentially ignored most of Worldcon in order to meet with David.
We were just hanging out.
Yeah,
I was a bit frustrated with my brother because he's like, I don't want to hear any spoilers now.
I know. No. Well, I made up for it at dinner before we left. I filled your head full of spoilers, and
it was good.
And we're going to fill everybody else's head here.
Yeah. So this is your spoiler warning. So if you want to finish Practical Adept first, this is obviously a recorded live stream. You will be able to dip back in the future and find out what we were talking about. So, but this is your chance to exit the stream, and we're going to continue with the spoiler section. So, Cole, if we can get
the next one.
Yeah. You've got the next one, Craig. Go.
Yep. Will we see the Karshak underground city?
Yes, we will. I can't tell you. I can't promise you exactly where or when. But there's a reason I seeded that all the way back in Mage Lord and wanted it as a plot point. In a lot of ways, it will be what we think of as traditional dwarven cities. Moria, Tolkien did a masterful job with that. But the Karshak aren't exactly dwarves in the Tolkienian sense, and so. As we have met and explored the various dwarvish clans, we've seen how they are culturally very different from each other, and that's going to have an effect on how the Karshak build or rebuild their city, their underground city, especially now that they're prosperous again. One thing that Minalan has done for the Karshak is he actually built something, which is the first time in close to 1,000 years that the Karshak have done anything other than maintenance. The Alon stopped building at a certain point for reasons that are obvious. You don't put a new roof on a house that's going to be demolished. And so when we do see the Karshak city, I think it will be a reflection of the Karshak's aspirations and perspectives. It'll be their own place. And in a similar way, the Malchus Alon and even the Kilnusk will end up developing their own place, a culturally significant center. And Minalan kind of makes it all happen. And so he's kind of the godfather of the dwarves at this point. If for no better reasons that they're insanely useful, and it really pisses off the Alka Alon. So, he's going to continue supporting them, but that doesn't mean that they don't have their intertribal issues also present. But Minalan has established himself as a figure of respect, and the fact that he was able to rediscover and reconnect the Karshak to their ancient city is certainly going to be a factor going forward.
Great. Could we get the next? Thanks, Cole. All right. So we've got a community member that points out that Farisians break their days up into 4 parts. We've got the morning, we've got the noontide, we've got the afternoon, and we've got the evening. Is this a remnant of how the colonists had structured their working days?
In my opinion, it's a remnant for how people in subtropical cultures structure their working days. And this is an opinion. But I've read a lot of accounts of people from cooler climates visiting people in warmer climates. And I think one consistent thread has been how when you're dealing with a fairly temperate climate, you don't have to react on a day-to-day basis as directly as people in tropical climates. If you think about something like monsoon season and how that has a dramatic impact on how the people in the subcontinent and across the Malaysian archipelago and all that have to deal with their day-to-day lives. Sure, you can plan for a season of extra preparedness. We're in the middle of hurricane season right now and just recovering from one. As a matter of fact, I got a call from Victoria from Podium just to make sure that I was still here. She was doing a welfare check on all of her authors in North Carolina. But as I go back and I read historical accounts, and admittedly, most of them tend to be European colonizers or explorers who are visiting tropical climes for the first time. One thing that's consistent is that the natives don't work the same way that the Europeans did. Up at sunup, work all day, and then collapse at night. That they had a more lackadaisical attitude towards work. A lot of this is covered and colored by cultural prejudices, but I think a lot of it is due to the occasionally unstable climate, or at least unstable weather that subtropical and tropical environments endure, and how the people have to adapt to that. And just being that hot makes you not want to work that hard in the sun for an extended period of time. So
Army didn't give me that break.
yeah, it's the sort of thing where I think it's much more a matter of latitude than a matter of attitude. But one contributes to the other, and I think I lived in Florida when I was a kid, and I've got relatives in Florida. I visit it fairly frequently. And anytime you get south of, say, central Georgia, people's attitudes start changing because of the weather and the heat. And I think that's just, and Farise, that has been institutionalized in a way, both formally and informally, in ways that the Narasi just find inherently frustrating. I covered that pretty extensively in the book, but yeah, if you're thinking of Farise, think of Miami, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale.
The next question, we're going to talk about that. So,
all right, lay it on me.
Can we have the next question, please? Which cultures did you draw on for Farise?
Excellent.
How's that for a transition?
I actually drew upon several different tropical and subtropical cultures. Believe it or not, everything from Caribbean cultures to Mediterranean cultures to the cultures of South and Central America and Southeast Asia in particular. Hot, humid, frequent rainstorms, rainforest levels of rain. There are some things that you can draw commonalities from across human culture and across history. And I tried to kind of combine all of that together. And there are specific cultural influences that have particularly impacted Farise. In a lot of ways, they're like the other cultures that surround the Shattered Sea, who share essentially a common geography. And with things like Porsago, which was completely made up. So if you're trying to find a recipe for Porsago anywhere,
I was thinking you were doing breadfruit.
It's similar to breadfruit, but I made it alien breadfruit with a couple of perks to it. One of which is that Farisians and other peoples in the around the Shattered Sea, particularly amongst the Shattered Isles, enjoy a large degree of personal autonomy because they are not dependent on a complex grain system in order to provide their staple. That makes a huge difference at a fundamental level in how you approach your culture and how you approach your politics. But it also that sort of thing. I drew from breadfruit. I drew from yams in a way. I wanted to make create a staple that would make the Farisians inherently independent. But I also, for things like the reroll, totally made that up. But it's based roughly on a couple of dozen different tropical climate clothing styles that tend to be very simplistic, very elegant in a lot of ways, artistically speaking, and are something that can be endlessly customized for the body type, shape, and condition that's being used. And there were some specific traditions in Malaysia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia that I kind of drew upon for that. And when you have things like Unstar and silk coming in and a lot of soft textiles, and I think you get a lot of cultural investment in that particular thing. But I think that's, as I'm studying Malagasy culture right now, as I prepare for future books, I'm getting a lot of impressive information that kind of helps me fill in the background of what Islander culture is compared to mainland culture, and that's been helpful.
Oh, great. Could we get the next? Thanks, Cole. So it was great meeting Min's daughter. And where did you get your inspiration for her?
My daughter and every other little girl I have ever known. Basically, Lamari is she's a new quantity to men, but I did my best to construct her as a character that reflected a lot of the burning ambitions and sometimes very idealized approach to the world. Any father who's raised a little girl knows that at some point she's going to come to you and say, this thing over here happened and that's just not fair. Do something about it. And it doesn't matter if she was complicit in that unfairness to begin with. There's a certain appeal to paternal authority that little girls do. Sometimes in a way that frustrates both them and their father. And I kind of wanted to bring that element to Lamari. She's a very intelligent young girl. She's Min's daughter. All of Min's kids are reasonably intelligent. She's magically talented, but she had a very different path towards mastering her magic than Minalan or his apprentices, and that colors her perspective.
Well, you said she's got a history. We were talking about
He does have a history, and not all of that has been revealed yet. It's been hinted at, especially in context of Nualta and just what happened during the occupation. But she's also been doing this long enough so that she's starting to get frustrated with the process. And just like Atina, when girls get frustrated, they make stuff happen sometimes. And it's not always the best thing. It's not always the best thought out. But girls have a drive, I guess that's almost instinctual, to make the world a better place. And unfortunately for Lamari, she was put in a position where she basically was offered a way to do it that involved assassinating people, and that comes with a lot of baggage, and she's already trying to escape that baggage, and we'll see this sort of thing reflected as we get into the Talon and the Flame, because it's some of what Dara is contending with. when it comes to being a child soldier, being put in a position where you have to take a life and defend your home far before you're really ready to or emotionally capable of it. In a lot of ways, Lamari's been manipulated and in turn been taught how to manipulate. And so she's just trying to find the best deal for herself and for her people and for her city. And suddenly she's got Santa Claus as daddy, who appears and has the possibility of actually doing it. And I think that the mental state that Min is in at that point makes him particularly susceptible. And what he does as a result is largely in response to the fact that his whole perspective changes when he realizes he has a daughter. And I credit this with a couple of my friends who have learned later in life that they did indeed have children that they didn't know about, and how that can really change your perspective. So I was trying to reflect that as well. But Min and Lamari are both going through their own psychological journeys. They're not always going to be helpful to each other, but he's really all she's got, and he feels an obligation to her, not just because she's his daughter, but because she represents a lot of what he felt was wrong with the occupation, and this is his opportunity to correct that.
That's great, Craig.
I thought we were going to the quickfire now. Min often reflects on history and how magic is a tool, not a solution to all of Kalidor's problems. Given his tendency to empower his children, is Min repeating King Kamaklavan's mistakes?
No, he's making his own mistakes entirely. I've already set up 2 or 3 major conflicts, and thanks for the question, Dave. I've already set up 2 or 3 major conflicts with his children and between his children that will inevitably play out. But he's doing what every father does, I think, in that position, which is try to do the best you can for your kids, both individually and collectively. So I'm happy that people are kind of catching on to this. But Min is really, he's not just dividing his empire or looking at his legacy at this point. He's raising his family. And I think that's the biggest difference between him and someone like a conqueror or a high court official like King Kamaklavan. He's not really looking at his specific legacy to his children. He's pretty confident that they will be taken care of regardless of what happens. I think he's more interested in developing his children and making them worthy of any legacy that he leaves them, which I think is the natural response of a father of 1 to 2 families. Kamaklavan, he had multiple children from multiple wives. So the 2 situations aren't dissimilar, but their approach to it is very different. And the horrible mistakes that they're making are very different as well.
Yeah, I'm just hearing in the background that we're making great time. So
I'm
this
trying to
is
be and not ramble as much. But
no, we've refined the process and we're getting the best stuff. So that's great. Yeah, please call if you can. Thank you. Nice and short. Oh no, we've done this one, I think.
Yes.
Can we jump to the next one? We had to replace the question a bit earlier because it was a bit long for our slider. That's
Okay.
brilliant. Thanks, Cole. So is the Iris the true order of the Secret Tower or just another shadow organization? How extensive is their influence on current events?
I would say that they're not the true order of the Secret Tower. They came from different places. The Iris is a bureaucratic remnant left over from the fall of the original colonial government, which was, as we will learn, taken over by the Magi on Perwin when they established the Magocracy. The exact specifics of that we'll get into more in Lalastian's account of the fall of Perwin. which is a couple of years out probably. But as I go on, I realize that that's going to be an essential part of the lore that needs to be explained. And I think I've come to an idea of how exactly I'm going to do it. Order of the Secret Tower is a remnant of the Magocracy, the late Magocracy specifically. And
The
so,
Privy Council, right?
pardon?
They are the remnant of the Privy Council to the Archmage, right?
Right. To the Archmage from the later Magocracy that controlled the mainland, and that's an important distinction. So they spring from roughly the same place institutionally, but the Iris is a lot more devious and a lot more powerful, and basically, and we'll get into the details of this at a later book, but basically, as the mundane government of Purwin realized it was going to fall, it made contingency plans, and the under the influence of various constructed intelligences, in order to ensure the survival of the human race, the human colony, they needed to ensure that things didn't go completely fallow, completely wild. And so, as part of the continuity of civilization and continuity of species paradigms, the Iris was given additional powers and invested with a certain paramilitary level of resource. They have secret bases, and their primary function is to observe the development of the human colony. To what end is a big question, and that's where we're going to find Minalan really coming into conflict with the Iris, because the Iris has a plan, but Minalan has a plan, and those two plans are mutually exclusive. Minalan recognizes, or will come to recognize very quickly, just how advantageous and how powerful the Iris is, but will also appreciate its limitations as an organization. It's an underground organization in that the core of the Iris has maintained almost colonial level of technology and civilization, but they've done it remotely, and they've purposefully not tried to prop up civilization. As a matter of fact, from Min's perspective, they almost seem invested in seeing it fall. And so the two forces will be at odds, and the Iris will be another organization that Min is going to have to challenge in some ways. His biggest advantage is that the Iris, despite the fact that they've been watching for so many centuries and maintaining a small, highly educated group of human beings and the odd constructed intelligence to keep their organization going, they don't really understand magic, not in the way that it's developed. They never really did. They saw it as a problem, a technology that they couldn't control, and therefore at odds with their ultimate plan. And so at various points in history, they have influenced or intruded in a way that would discourage magic from being a controlling force, because it's something that without that understanding and without the development of that talent institutionally, they're not going to be able to use much influence. That being said, they do employ magi, just like they employ spies and pirates and slavers and merchants and all sorts of other people. But they don't. They have an inherent mistrust of the Magi and their motivations. Something also that's left over from the fall of Purwin. So it's not just another shadow organization. It is the shadow organization that has survived. One of the few that has survived in continuity from the fall of colonial civilization on Calidor. And they're a much bigger fish than the Order of the Secret Tower, and the resources that they have access to are going to be vast, dramatic, and they're also going to be absolutely essential for what Minalan needs to do going forward. So there'll be some conflict on that front.
You can shut this question down. I just as a follow up, do they have any link to those Valley people that we might in the?
No direct link.
Okay.
From the Iris's perspective, the Valley people are an aberration, and they just wish they would kind of quietly go away. Once you learn about the Valley people, you might agree. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Next question, please. I know the person who wrote this question, so I'm going to tweak it a little bit. With Min as the new Dodge, does that make him Rod's equal? And if that is true, has he now burned all the bridges to the Dukes and to the King?
Well, excellent question, and one that I'll be spending a lot of Sea Mage answering. But essentially, by claiming the sovereignty over Farise, Minalan has established himself as an independent political and sovereign force, which theoretically makes him as equal to the king as any other sovereign. But you have to take that with a grain of salt, because, being sovereign, you can consider a head of state to be technically equal to another head of state. But if you're from Monaco or San Marino or Liechtenstein, you may technically be at the same level as the president of the United States and Russia and China. But your sovereignty, though it might be absolute, is not going to have the same potency as the sovereignty of those larger things.
Yeah, but the question is basically, is Rod going to be ticked?
Oh, yeah, he's going to be pissed as hell. Are you kidding? There's no escaping that. And Min knows it.
Yep.
And this is a calculated risk that Min made. He is not going into this blind. This wasn't, something that he did without a lot of foresight. I didn't reveal that foresight largely because I wanted to have it be a surprise to the reader as you came across these revelations. If I had Min ruminating on whether or not he was going to stage essentially a coup d'etat and take over Farise that way, the entire book, then by the time he did it, it would have been a foregone conclusion. And honestly, he was pretty ambivalent about the whole idea right up to the point when he met Lamari, and that changed his perspective enough to give him the reason to enthusiastically take that step. Now, the consequences of that, he also understands, which is why he did it in the way that he did, under an assumed name. And when we eventually do get back to Rard and Grandine and the royal court, and they're freaking out because there's been a revolution in Farise, and there's a new doge, and Merwin's making attempts, and everything is in chaos. Minalan's not going to necessarily own up to being Merkandar right up front, and kind of force Grandine to figure that out. And once they do, they're going to realize that they're kind of in a trap here. Minalan, as Count of the Mage Law, is empowered and to a limited extent to conduct his own foreign policy. Much the same way that I guess you could say the Duke of Normandy was empowered to conduct his own foreign policy when he seized control of England. In 1066.
All right, 1060. That's to the sword time for us, I think.
Right. Yeah. It's still too soon. But that has consequences. William the Conqueror, he was King of England, but he was also Duke of Normandy, sworn to the King of France. And fealty, theoretically, and practicality, most of the various dukes around France were largely sovereign in their own right and conducted their own foreign policies as they needed to. Min's stretching this from that perspective, but by seizing control under an assumed name like that, while tacitly admitting to various people, yeah, it's me, shut up about it. That's going to place the royal court of Castleshar in a very difficult position, because if they acknowledge that it's the same person, then Rard's going to be forced to try to call him to account in court. But at that point, Min can reveal himself publicly as being the sovereign of Farise and demand that, essentially insists that he has diplomatic immunity, that he should be accorded the same rights and respects of, he's wearing two hats. And at a certain point, it's going to be a political fiction that's going to be required to be maintained until it isn't. And that's basically the kind of gray space that Minalan is.
But doesn't that feed the argument that the Dukes had with Min when he was doing his educate the young Dukes thing, where Angwin kind of hit him in the face with, "We don't know what the hell you're doing. We can't control you. You're scaring the hell out of us."
Yeah, that's precisely it, which is why I set that up in the previous book. That was an important thing to establish, so that when the argument comes back around, Minalan will Angwin and the other Dukes will have an argument to make. But Min is going to be able to argue force majeure, and when it comes down to it, there's not much that the Dukes can do about it without stirring up a lot of trouble. Now, whether or not they want to do that, that's a different question, especially when you have issues of peasants' revolts, a resurgent Merwini kingdom that's looking to be more expansionist and isn't involved in its own civil war. And there may be some domestic challenges that are also going to be complicated by this. Peasants' revolts, court intrigue,
to fight each other.
Yeah. So there's a lot that comes to it. It's a very complex situation, and Min's trying to thread the needle. We'll see how successful he is, or if he will be overtaken by events, and the whole point will become moot.
Thanks, Terry.
So many follow-up questions, but we haven't got time. Yes, please call before I derail us. The gods Min encounters seem to have a deeper understanding of the past, but still appear somewhat limited in their knowledge of Humani history. How much do the gods really know about actual events?
It depends on the god, and I'm not saying that lightly, but some gods, their spheres are broad enough to encompass history. For example, Luin would have a fairly good grasp of history, especially of the Narasi duchies. But the older gods, some of them may have a more detailed knowledge of a particular history in Purwin, or in the early Majocracy on the mainland. But again, it also depends on their sphere. A lot of gods just don't care about history. They care about the here and now. The agricultural gods, Huan doesn't give a damn about what happened in Purwin or the Majocracy or whatever. He cares about how much rain you got in the spring and whether or not that's going to make the wheat sprout. Similarly, each god has a different perspective on it. And while some have an inherent understanding because they're gods of wisdom or insight or poetry of history, law, that sort of thing, some of them will have a more specialized knowledge because of their sphere and because of where they came from. But will be able to glean kind of philosophically some deeper truths behind that. But they can only express what they've been fed by their human worshippers over the years, and the memories and experiences of the humans that have developed. So they're limited in scope, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of impressive insights. And now that they have persistence, the gods can learn, actually learn, as we see Duin do, and that we'll see Luin do in the future as he and Min mix it up a little bit. I think perhaps one of my proudest moments in writing Practical Adept was Min's response to how to control Luin. and the don't piss me off. Because I thought about it pretty hardcore about how could you constrain a divinity who sees nuances in the law as its oxygen. And the easiest way was to take it out of objective hands and make it completely subjective, with Minalan being the subject, I guess you could say. So having men come out and say, "Don't piss me off," I know what you're capable of, or at least I suspect what you're capable of, and my attorney, on the advice of my attorney, don't piss me off. I think was the best response to that sort of situation.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it won't come back and bite him in the ass at some point. So
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Next question,
Great.
please. Pre-inundation vehicles are a big topic for the community. How are these vehicles, like the June bug and the Beast, fueled? Gareth spoke about the need for the Beast to be refueled from time to time. So what is that going to take?
That's a good question, and it kind of varies from vehicle to vehicle, but most of the colonial era stuff was fueled by basically solid state electricity storage, really big, efficient batteries, which they didn't fully develop until after alien-human contact on Terra. That said, there are places where the colonials were willing to take some shortcuts for convenience and efficiency's sake. You mentioned the June bug in the question. I have a whole, and it's based, the people who know will know where I'm pulling it from, a whole sort of vocabulary of electrogravitic vehicles, how they're powered and how they work. And based on this structure, there were times when you could use the power to lift a vehicle and basically make it float, but that wouldn't be able necessarily to drive it, propel it forward. And a lot of people don't think about that sort of thing when they're messing around with magic or even high technology. But in the case of the June bug, you have the electrogravitic system that allows the thing to float, but it doesn't push it back and forth from place to place. And instead of building out a much bigger system, much heavier system, and much more cumbersome system for the need at the time, the colonials used the electrogravitic system for lift, but for drive they used basically jet fuel, high octane.
You mentioned red mercury in the book.
Well, yes, red mercury, and that's kind of one of those black box buzz terms, Star Trek sorts of things. Yep. It's been mentioned in the literature, apocryphal literature in the past when it comes to various vehicles. And it's kind of a misnomer, but I like the term, and I thought it was appropriate to use in this. And it also gives something that's going to be difficult to create with magic,
right?
Since you need a nuclear power plant to do so. But something like the Beast that's electrically fueled, which means it can be recharged back at the Cavern of the Ancients, which has geothermal power. And now that there is a working reactor in Farise, there's going to be opportunities to, recharge some of the weapons. But don't forget, these things are 700 years old. They were built largely with durability in mind, but we're reaching in a lot of ways the operational end of their life cycle, if not exceedingly dramatic, going beyond it. They've lost efficiency, they've lost reliability. And until new ones can be manufactured somehow, and since most of the manufacturing base for the Terran colony was on the horizon, that's going to be a difficult thing to manage for a while. That doesn't mean that men won't push forward and make it happen as best he can, but we're going to see some unlikely stuff going through the skies of Calidor for a while. Until a more secure industrial base is built.
That's good. We've got one more question for this round, and then we're going into a quick fire.
All right.
So, is this you or me, Craig? Is it me? I was getting too into that question there before. So, is it possible the Alon and the Lyrans share a common cosmic lineage? Like a shared creator or genetic divergence, the Alon are very, very human-like despite their differences. This is from Matt on the Discord.
Thank you for the question, Matt. And the easy answer is yes. If you go back far enough, they do. I think all humanoid species at a certain point probably share some sort of common ancestor. Now, how far back you go, that could be a big question. Nor is humanoid, this isn't precisely a Star Trek sort of universe where humanoid is the default for any new alien species. Thankfully, my budget is higher than that, and I can do more than put a new nose wrinkle on to do an alien species. As a matter of fact, Calidor itself has a series of waves of settlement and colonization from differently designed species or differently evolved species, depending on your perspective. And I think that the humanoid form is probably assuming that there is alien life in the universe, and based on the evidence or at least apocryphal suggestions that I've seen, I think it's fairly common, but I don't think it's ubiquitous, and I don't think it's the only game in town by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's pretty clear that different biological environments are going to produce vastly different species, theoretically speaking. And that when you throw panspermia and some of the
Draconia.
And colonization, conquest, exploration. There's a reason that invasive species are invasive, and I don't think it's too out there to suggest, for example, that octopi in Earth's oceans perhaps did not evolve entirely from Earth's oceans. And when we get into the aquatic life of Calidor, you're going to find that there are octopi there too, as well as de-evolutions of octopi that predated human contact with Calidor. And that will be a subject of some discussion when that point is brought.
Great. I think we're going to head into a quick fire question round, and I think
conjure the lightning.
Craig, do you want to kick us off, and we'll just alternate as Terry answers, and we'll go backwards and forwards. No problem.
Does Aryanite extend or shorten the lifespan of the mages? The mages with stones.
It depends on how much they smoke. It depends, and it depends on how the mage uses it. In general, it's going to shorten a mage's lifespan, but again, that's entirely on how rough he is on his body or her body, and the level of power that they're channeling and for what purposes. The Farisians have been able to use it to slightly extend their lives simply because the few pieces that they have, they've been very conservative and secretive about it. But you'll find that a lot of the Farisian magi who have kept these little stones secret have been doing their best to extend their lives as long as possible. Whereas the war magi have been tearing through their central nervous systems with humongous amounts of power, and that's going to have an effect over time. So it depends, but largely it's going to be detrimental, not helpful.
You think you might see like a stream of people like waiting for help from the handmaiden to help repair their enneagrams in the
future? There might be some of that. There might be some madness, and there might just be some unexpected physical effects from the use of Aryanite, depending on whether or not you're susceptible to that. And that's going to vary from individual to individual, just like a genetic predisposition towards cancer is. So.
Yeah, wow. So next question, will you plan to write after 50, will you plan to write after book 30, or is that your big ending?
Okay, book 30 is where the series is destined to end. That being said, there are already plenty of books I could go back and write about stuff that happened before that. And you know, I'm not saying no to a reunion tour at some point. Basically, if I get to book 30, God willing, then I will have produced probably almost 50 Spellmonger books at that point if I continue going with my current plan. So, you know, at this point, I'm looking at completing book 30 around when I'm 65 or so. So theoretically, that would be my retirement. But geez, you can't spend this long creating a world and then living in it and not continue to live in it for the rest of your life. So this is something that I on another note, you'll find that you don't see many, Harper Lee aside, you don't see many retired writers. You see writers that quit selling, but once you got the addiction, man, you can't stop. I think I made a good decision early on by devoting everything I had to Calidor, simply because I didn't want to be the kind of fantasy writer who does a trilogy, makes up a world, gets people involved, and then skips on to a completely different world, completely different set of magic and that sort of thing. I find that jarring. Fantasy readers in particular really like long form fantasy. I think that's proven true. Everything from Lord of the Rings to the Narnia books, and certainly has been borne out by Game of Thrones and the Harry Potter books. So I'm glad I plotted it for 30 novels. I'll keep going to 30. That's a commitment. But beyond that, there's plenty of stuff I can back over and explore that I missed along the way. And hopefully by that time I'll have be enormously wealthy and have a huge Amazon or other.
Be one of their VP partners.
Yeah. You know.
Great. Okay, next question, please. Will a unitary or monotheistic god ever show up and try and take over?
Issues tits. Let's hope not. Seriously, the way that I designed the Magasphere of Calidor, the environment in which magic can be practiced, a divinity with access to divine magic, which is essentially a quintessential magic, a magic about the nature of reality itself, including time and space and all that good stuff. If a truly monotheistic god showed up, I can't think of too many instances that they would be inclined to be well behaved, unless they were totally altruistic, and even then, altruism often has consequences that can be just as horrific as being evil, and that's why the colonists and the Alon kind of quietly agreed that monotheism had to be exiled.
But when the New Horizon shows up, you're going to have a whole population of people who came from that environment.
There are going to be some challenges. There's no doubt. There is a settlement in the far west of the Shattered Sea, where the other Jevelar is, that is comprised of the descendants of all the monotheists who did not want to adhere to a new polytheistic faith.
Wow.
And at some point we will meet them and we will realize why the Unstarans guard them viciously and will not let them expand.
Well, I can hear Lauren's voice in the background. Terry! No worries. Next question, please.
Section.
What theme song should Tyndall have, and why is it Tub Thumping by Chubombawamba?
That's actually not a bad choice. He is I love Tyndall, I really do, and he reminds me of some guys I fought with in the SCA, and just some dudes that I know who Tyndall never met a problem that unless it was a girl problem that he couldn't handle. And he doesn't know he can't handle it. But that's part of his charm and part of his advantage is he doesn't know how stupid he is sometimes. And he can go out and do, like using lead to kill a dragon, which it can have, if he was willing to give up easily, he would never have thought about that. But he's the kind of guy who's always looking for a solution. And sometimes the solution is, to get back up and hit him again, because that might be the only thing he's left with. And I think part of that's inspired by Minalan in a way. Tyndall and Minalan are very near-natured to each other. They have similar outlooks on life, whereas Rondell is a little more circumspect, a little more scholarly, and a little more suspect, which serves him well and makes him a good partner for Tyndall. But Tyndall definitely got Min's enthusiasm and willingness to mix it up. And so Tub Thumping, I think that's a great theme song for Tyndall. I don't know what Rondell's will be yet. He's a little deeper and a little more devious, and now he's got this wife who's so much more deep and devious than he is that they're definitely going to evolve. That's one of the things that we'll address in the Golden Goblin is their changing relationship with each other in regards to, are they going to end up Barney and Fred on the Flintstones? I don't know, but they're certainly going to maintain a connection. And a strong one, despite the fact that they've been wed, been nuptialized, as is sometimes said in the South.
Next question, please. Since the 2 snowstone spells, what percentage of the population has access to their Rajira?
Okay, within proximity of those areas, it's going to go up dramatically. Baseline for magical talent amongst the general human population runs fairly low, roughly 1% to 2%. Again, roughly. It varies depending on the genetics and the geography. But once you start throwing snowstone around, you're going to see a dramatic increase in levels up to 10 to 15% of the human population will have some expression of Rajira. Theoretically, everyone could. But honestly, the Alon managed to do it. But you end up spending far too much time learning how to do magic than you do actually living your life. And so the thought of all human beings being able to do magic is kind of horrifying in some ways. As it is now, your Rajira can emerge more easily in proximity to snowstone and things like Mullapar. And in Seven Door, you have both of those. So you will have a very rich legacy to draw upon. Plus, you've got the fact that Seven Door has drawn plenty of powerful magi to it. And in a couple of generations, you're going to see a proclivity for Rajira go up to a point where it becomes culturally very significant.
Next question, please. Did Maid Chlorine from Verone, to whom Min gave a golden rose, ever make it to Seven Door?
Why, yes, she did. And it's fascinating, a fascinating bit of synchronicity that someone asked this question, because she actually will appear as a character in The Talon and the Flame, and she will be a secondary character, or tertiary character, I guess. But she'll be able to give the horror's perspective to Dara about men and relationships.
Oh, there we go.
And believe it or not, that's something that Dara's kind of a prude, so she needs a different perspective, and she gets a lot of different perspectives in this book, from Allura, from Pentandra, from Alia even. She doesn't have a mother, so part of this book is kind of a search for a mother figure. that can advise her through this very difficult
Not
time.
what would be perfect.
Well, and I'm not saying that that they won't talk, but Nautha. Don't forget that these books are run concurrent with Practical Adept, so Nautha is kind of occupied.
Oh, I was just kidding.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah, but
she's such
no,
a strong personality.
oh, she is, and she'll be. Just wait till she's a mom.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point. Chlorine, I really liked her when I wrote her as kind of a spot character way back in the first ecology, and yeah, I always I seeded that character just for this sort of situation. Although when talking about books to write after book 30, if I get bored, I may someday write The Horrors of Sevendor and just explore Sevendor's sexual history and sexual culture. But I have her where she is for a very specific reason, to be a counselor to Dara in a particular moment. But if anybody is wondering, she hangs around the Alembic. She hangs around the Staff and Sword. She hangs around the Drowned Dragon. She's basically a whore about town, and with a heart of gold, and is very socially conscious. And I think that's something that Dara misses or missed with not having a mother directly responsible for her upbringing. A very valuable thing that mothers bring to a daughter is an awareness of their social position and the social environment that they exist in. And Dara basically got drafted at such an early age that she's largely ignorant of that. She's brushed up against it. She's aware of it, but she isn't steeped in it the way that most girls of her age and class are. Because she didn't have a mother. Her life took a different turn. And so a lot of what The Talon and the Flame is going to explore is Dara trying to solicit advice or get advice from other women and see their perspectives. And I think that's something that most women do. My wife and I have talked about it extensively, in the fact that anyway, I know I'm veering off here, but
right. Well, it reminds me a little bit that Alice Hoffman wrote Practical Magic back in the day, and there's a film version, and I think the aunts cast a love spell on the Sandra Bullock character, where they have to unbind her legs with molasses to get her off with someone. So
you got to do what you got to do sometimes to get the magic done.
Next question, please. One book off the top of your head that has or still inspires you.
That's easy, and that's The Lord of the Rings, taken as a trilogy. You can't not be a fantasy writer in this modern age and not have Tolkien as one of your godfathers. I'm not going to say he invented the genre, but he certainly refined it and perfected it and popularized it in a way that no other author has. I mean, with full props to C.S. Lewis, even Mary Shelley, you could argue. There were great works of fantasy written before and have been written since, but Tolkien was like Shakespeare for drama. I think Tolkien for fantasy literature really set the bar, set the standard, and whatever is written since is going to be a reflection, or at least affected by that. So definitely Lord of the Rings. I mean, I've got the freaking Hobbit, the Return of the King poster over here on my wall here, original poster in a big old kiss my ass frame, because Tolkien is so. I
have the same picture hanging behind me.
Oh, I'm missing something. So next question, is Farise still in Angerspell?
Yes. Next question.
Are any of the Iron Band members from Sevendor still alive, and will they appear in future books?
Yes, there are. As a matter of fact, the Iron Band as an institution has continued to expand, albeit slowly. Now that the war is over, there's a question, not just for the Iron Band, but for units like Dara's Skyriders, about whether they're even needed anymore. And so their nature and composition will change. We'll see a couple of members of the Iron Band pop up, probably in the Golden Goblin, and in future short stories. And it's kind of like a low rent French Foreign Legion in a lot of ways. Even after their essential nature changes, it's still a haven for men who fucked up in their regular lives and are looking for, young stupid ones are looking for adventure, and older ones are looking for either redemption or just a place to hide from the consequences of their old lives. But they still serve a useful purpose, and Minalan will end up supporting them in one way or another, even as their basic mission changes over time.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes to see if we can get through as many of these as we can. Were axolots part of the
Axolotls. My daughter's obsessed with them.
Okay. Does Lelastian know about them?
She does. She knows about all of the critters that the Terrans brought to Calidor. And for those who haven't been clued into this yet, the Terran colony brought not just genetic examples that could be recreated of all Earth's existing biosphere, or as much as they could scrape together. They also went back and took as much of Earth's prehistoric biospheres as they could. So there are examples of Pleistocene and even earlier animals that were included because from a colonial perspective, you never know what's going to work. And so introducing a wide variety of fauna and flora into the Calidoran environment was essential to figuring out what species would be able to adapt and thrive and which wouldn't. And that would designate how well the colony would be able to survive. And so axolotls are in there, sloths, both the three-toed kind and the giant variety. There are woolly mammoths, mastodons on Calidor. I will tell you that they very easily adapted to the environments that they were put in. There are apes, great apes, and monkeys, particularly around Unstara, which is a very tropical climate. There are even a couple of monkey species that are native to Farise. So there's a mixture, but there are also species that were resurrected and revived and given a new life on Calidor that we will be meeting. Axolotls definitely are in one of those categories. Whether or not they'll make an appearance, we'll see. I will tell you that lemurs definitely will. And that's only partially because one of my very good friends, Melanie Curry, works at the Duke Lemur Center here, and I get to go and look at lemurs anytime I want. And as a matter of fact, I'm considering purchasing naming rights for an II. The Lemur Center sells the naming rights to their lemurs, and the IIs in particular are named for wizards, male and female wizards when they're born. So I may at some point scrape up the cash to have Minalan and Pentandra as official members of the Duke Primate Center. We'll have to see though. That's a cool, expensive ask, but lemurs are cool. And
yeah, great.
Next question, please. Is Lelastian working on extending the average human lifespan? From Derek Reeves.
Good question, Derek. She's mostly concerned with the Alon at this point. She feels that the human lifespan will improve as, and she feels pretty secure about this, as the level of technological sophistication and self-awareness improves. But that's not her primary consideration. Human beings at this point during the settlement, during the colonial period, human lifespan got to about 120 years in ideal conditions. But colonizing a new world is far from an ideal condition, and now the average lifespan is somewhere in the early to mid 60s. Extending it would be helpful, only in the sense that, from Lelastian's perspective, she would see extending it dramatically beyond 120 years as problematic. And when we meet the Valley people, that some of that perspective will make a lot more sense. But Lelastian is of the general opinion that attempts to preternaturally improve your lifespan beyond your natural time quickly lead to folly, as the Enshadowed have shown. And there's a lot to be said for that, considering how much time, energy, and money was spent during the various Chinese empires attempting to find methods of extending the Taoist concept of immortality, which led to all sorts of expeditions all over the place that if the Chinese followed up on it would make half the world Chinese, but they didn't. So, but the same sort of thing is kind of in play, and Lelastian's not going to intervene in humanity the way that she is with the Alon races, because she basically has too much respect for humanity as it was presented to her.
Great stuff. Next one. Can Min communicate with Farise in the Cave of the Ancients?
Yes, technically he can. It's not easy, and there hasn't been an occasion that's called for it. Usually he communicates through third parties. Now that the volcano has started to blow, that's going to be a little difficult to maintain. That being said, developments in Practical Adept may have given Min additional capabilities that he's going to be able to utilize to contact Farise, which may or may not be important in the future, but certainly will be an important factor going forward in the story.
Okay. I'm just going to cock that gun, put it on the top.
Okay.
Can the Dune bug fly up to the Echo stations or the Moon station?
No, it cannot. It is purely a light aerial vehicle. It is not pressurized. It's more like a helicopter or a small plane. It can't really go too terribly high without suffering.
So we're waiting for Serenity.
Yes, or a reasonable facsimile.
Yep.
Yeah. Next question. Will there be more backstories of the memories of the people in Minalan's head? Nathan Stang, Facebook.
Thanks for the question. Good question. And the answer is I'm playing around with the idea because I don't want these people to go so quickly. If I do explore that, it will not be in a main series novel as much as something. I would probably do something similar to Mad Mage, a novella that explored that. And I've got a pretty good idea of how that would come about and why. And it's going to be difficult to set up. If it happens, it'll be either concurrent with or just after book 18 Sea Mage. So that would be the time span. Now, whether or not I'm going to be able to hit that on the first pass, or if I'll go back and write it in retrospect, I don't know yet. I'm already looking at a fairly ambitious writing schedule, and even with bringing in apprentices to kind of help out, there are limits to just how much I can write and when, and I want to make sure that we keep going with the main series and the spinoff books that I think are going to be most valuable for the reader to know to augment the main series. But it's certainly something I want to explore and probably will at some point when I feel it's necessary.
Okay, Greg.
Will the printing press be reinvented?
Interestingly enough, it's already been reinvented, and this isn't something that there's a difference between being invented and being popularized. The fact of the matter is that the Magocracy had a form of the printing press that was used. The problem, honestly, wasn't the technology of the printing press. It was the loss of using paper as the medium. With papyrus, with the parchment reeds that they're using, that was something that was designed by the colonists to ensure that writing would never leave, because you'd always have something to write on. constructing paper is a fairly involved process, whereas the process for doing parchment reeds and turning it into usable parchment is a lot easier and can be done as a cottage industry. It can't be done at scale, though, and the sizes aren't completely standardized at all. So you get all sorts of differing sized papers, or essentially papers of differing qualities, different types of parchment, and you can't print at scale that way. You can do 20 books, sure, if you are very picky and selective about the parchment that you use so that it all fits in your press. But it's usually just easier to hand copy the books, especially since most of the books are a lot shorter than we would consider. So, that's basically why it hasn't been popularized and didn't take over the five duchies the way that it did medieval Europe. There are some technical limitations to it, but it's still there, and the concept is understood. But we might find a magical means of using information that goes beyond the printing press in the future.
Okay, next question. I think we're the last couple, I think.
Okay.
So how could the egg hatch when the lifespan of the celestial mother is millions of years? Time dilation to hatch, perhaps?
That's a very good question, and the simple answer is it's largely unknown. The egg, as men found it, has been encysted, and those who have studied biology understand that there are certain species that can encysst their progeny almost indefinitely. As a matter of fact, there's a great sci-fi idea about a human colony that colonizes a world. It's been floating around for years, and I think a couple of people have taken a stab at it. Human colony colonizes a world only to realize that the alien equivalent of cicadas are just now starting to wake up after thousands and thousands of years and are going to wreck everything. Lifespan is a weird thing, and biology provides nature with a lot of different ways to ensure that the progeny will continue to exist and be able to regenerate itself in the future. So time dilation, that could very well be used as a means of hatching it, but there's more than just sitting on it for a couple of thousand years that's going to make it hatch. Men will find an answer, but it will be there will be a sacrifice involved in doing so.
Oh yeah.
Oh no. Okay, cool.
I'll leave that nice and vague, and
And I'm not saying a word.
Last question. You know something I don't know. Okay,
Oh,
go.
I guessed at something, and I don't want to
Okay.
even say it.
Okay, good. Your last question, Craig. This is the
Which
last one.
child is your favorite, and why is it your daughter?
well, yes, she's certainly my favorite daughter, without a doubt. At least the only one I know of. I do love my daughter. Morgan is absolutely outstanding. She's one of the few people I know that I've never known someone who didn't like her. Like, people accumulate enemies for all sorts of dumb reasons over the course of their life. I don't think anybody that she knows dislikes her. She's never had a coworker or a classmate who ever took a dislike to her. I'm very proud of her and celebrate her success, both as a craftsman and an artist. She's been getting more into art lately. For those who don't know, she is who assists me with the spine and back cover of my print novels. Right now we're working on Shadow Mage. I'm hoping to have that out before Christmas. But she's extremely talented, extremely introverted, and by God, she is the funniest person in a really dark and twisted way I think I've ever met. She loves cuddly kittens and Cthulhu monsters. It's just that kind of dichotomy.
Cthulhu kitten.
And It's funny. I grew up in a house full of boys, and so I was used to the brother and versus brother sort of relationship that I had growing up. And having a daughter has really been inspiring in a lot of ways. I think that's why some of my female characters are as strong as they are. Is I've been able to see how a woman is constructed from the ground up, and it's been very revelatory to me. And I'm extremely proud of her because she's my only tool using child. I mean, my boys, I feel sorry, for saying this, but you give her a piece of IKEA furniture or something like that and a screwdriver, and it's together and it's tight and it's good to go. My boys will spend days and have to watch 6 YouTube videos before they get there. But she's still one of the most completely feminine women I've ever met. And it's not a contradiction. It's a nuance of her personality. And so I won't say she's exactly my favorite of the three, but she's my favorite daughter by far. And
Nice.
I'll leave it at that because I got to live with her still, at least for a couple of months. We'll see. She and her boyfriend are just adorably stinking cute too, and I'm very pleased with the selection of man that she has made. Jordan is a
do you have that grave dug behind the house somewhere?
Yeah, it's still there. It's still there, and I got a backhoe now. I can dig as many more as I need to. I can dig it deep. There's no worry there. But I do. I think he's beyond that. He's gone a year with her, and I haven't heard them even raise their voices. And they live in a little apartment on the top floor of my house. But yeah, that hole will be there till it's needed. And hopefully someday I'll be able to pass it down to her and her children because she will have daughters, and the mother-daughter dichotomy is very different from the father-daughter relationship. So she may need it.
Sounds good. So we're in that wrap-up stage. Really, thanks from all of us, Terry. It's we're hugely grateful you've been able to carve this time out of a very busy moment with everything that's going on as well. So thank you. And would you like to remind us of the projects that are coming up, where people can meet you in the next few months?
Right. I do have something next weekend locally here in Hillsborough, North Carolina. I'm going to be appearing and doing a book signing, talking, whatever, at Studio 71 in Hillsborough. That's the art gallery and frame shop that my daughter Morgan works at, and is the proprietor is Lance Sawyers, who is the basis for Lance of Boone, and has been a constant inspiration and support for me for years, going back to the very beginnings of the series. And so I'll be appearing there, have a little booth and a couple of books to sign. And if you just want to stop by and chat, say hey, and talk about the series, that's where I'll be. Beyond that, I am fairly open at this point. I pretty much trashed my con schedule for Worldcon this year. But going forward, I'm open to additional appearances. And if you know of a con that needs a speaker, needs a panelist, needs someone to come and speak, sign books, whatever, I'll do a little dance, whatever you need me to do. Just have them email me at tmancour@gmail.com and we'll set something up. But my schedule's open. My RV hopefully will be ready. They're having to grind down the block a little bit and the head, just replace the radiator with a custom built radiator. But by God, the beast will be on the road. And that's what.
Don't invade Czechoslovakia.
We'll see. Czechoslovakia doesn't even exist anymore, thank goodness. I've named my GMC motorhome the Beast, so that it will have a lovely Calidor connection, and hopefully over the course of the next year I'll be able to use it to visit places all over, at least the eastern part of the United States, but hopefully also the western if I can get it over the Rocky Mountains. But we'll see. But if you want me to appear, contact your local con. Let them know that you're interested in coming to see me at their con, and tell them how to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to show up pretty much anywhere.
Great. Thanks, Terry. For everyone, we are going to be hanging out in the Discord if you've wanted to ask more questions or come and join us for a little while. Otherwise, what a great show. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Cole, for running us in the background.
Yes, thank you so much, Cole. You did an admirable job. Thank you.
And
thanks,
there is one.
Steel Garden Society.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
And there is one thing I'm just going to leave us out on.
All right. I'll catch you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.